be replaced by the member for Frome. Portfolios, Minister for Women and the Prevention of Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence. Minister appearing, Office for Women. Estimates of payment, Department for Human Services, 352,792,000. Administered items for the Department for Human Services, 1,167,059,000. I declare the proposed payments open for examination. Call on the Minister to make an opening statement if she so desires and to introduce her advisors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be making an opening statement, but I will introduce the people with me. On my left is Sandy Pitcher, the CE of the Department, Chief Financial Officer Nick Ashley. We also have Deputy CE Ruth Ambler, and behind me Dr. Sanjulta Bastev, Belle Marsden and Emily Humphreys, who is heading up our new Office for Prevention of Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Frome, opening statement or just straight to questions?
Straight to questions, and I'll be sharing that with my colleague, Member for Preston. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were might have been the lead on this one. So.
I might get started. Thanks, Chair. And opening statement only to say appreciate the Minister's presence in the committee and the advisors here for the purposes of this estimates process. I refer to Budget Paper 4, Volume 3, where I think we'll find ourselves focused, and page 114 and 15, and starting with 114. So it's Program 1, and Women, Equality and Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence Prevention. Perhaps by specific reference to the 25-26 targets, and the first of those targets, which is to lead the development of the government response to the Royal Commission into Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence. And I note, as I think all of the members will be aware, the recent gazettal of an extension of time from 1 July this year to I think 18 August this year for the handing down of that commission that Royal Commission report. And perhaps if I might just then indicate a presumption, we know that's in response, that's partly for the reason of there being such a strong response to that Royal Commission, and therefore might indicate that the Royal Commission's going to be coming back with some fairly substantial outcomes, recommendations and so on. And so I'd just open by inquiring what resources are available for the implementation in anticipation of findings of the Royal Commission, and what necessity does the government anticipate will be, for provision in the mid-year budget review? But first, by pointing to resources identified in the budget.
Thank you. Thank you to the member for the question. I'll just provide a very brief reflection on that gazettal, the change to the 18th of August, and what the member himself alluded to in terms of the volume of submissions and hearings and use of the Share With Us tool that the Royal Commission has encountered. As everybody in this place is aware, the Royal Commission commenced on the 1st of July and is led by extraordinary South Australian Commissioner Natasha Stott Despoja AO, and it is largely, in a general sense, looking at 4 themes of prevention, intervention, response and recovery and healing. and also looking at the coordination of the whole of system effort. And the Commissioner, as I said, and the Commission have received a total of 381 written submissions. 251 of those have been published. There have been numerous hearings right around the state and many people providing information in confidence. And the Royal Commission is now, as the member's spoken about, focused on preparing its final report and obviously reviewing those public hearing transcripts, submissions, data, and the huge body of evidence that's been collected over the last 11 months. It is due to that scale of engagement and ongoing interest from the community and the sector that adjustment to the Royal Commission's timeframes were agreed upon. And I reflect on that to say that I am so incredibly grateful for the work of the Commissioner and the Commission, but so pleased that so many women have had that opportunity to share their stories, to be heard, to know that their voices and experiences matter, and also that through this Royal Commission we are sending a message to our community that we will not tolerate domestic, family and sexual violence in this state. In terms of the investment, as the member would be aware, $3 million was committed to the establishment and running of the Royal Commission itself. As is articulated in this budget, we've also invested $1.5 million in the Central Response Unit, the Office for the Prevention of Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence, and that's been an incredibly important unit in terms of preparing the cross-government submission, but also responding to requests for information from the Commission, and also to providing any documents that are required. We have been very, very, very clear that significant investment, significant funding will be required on receipt of those Royal Commission findings. We very much look forward to, in about 7 or 8 weeks' time, to receiving those findings and to examining those findings and any recommendations the Commissioner has chosen to make. And we are very clear that there is investment that will follow on receipt of those findings as we understand the scope, the breadth of what the Commissioner proposes in terms of South Australia addressing any system gaps, and also elevating finally here in South Australia the opportunity we have to genuinely lead a whole of government, whole of community and whole of sector effort. So as I have said before publicly, significant investment will follow on receipt of those findings, and we look forward to the findings and examining exactly to which efforts we direct that funding. But let me be very, very clear. Our government absolutely embraces this once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally comprehensively tackle the awful prevalence of domestic, family and sexual violence and the gender inequality that sadly we know is a driver of this terrible prevalence of violence against women.
Thanks, Chair. It's a long answer, and I don't detect there any indication from the Minister that there's any money in the budget at all for responses to the outcomes of the Royal Commission, and indicate many shared sentiments in relation to the important work of the Commission. So if that's the case, there's no money in the budget, then what contingency has the government provided for in terms of response, or indeed, as I sort of foreshadowed already in the question, I mean, are South Australian women and all the rest of us going to have to wait for a mid-year budget review to get any identification of the funding that's necessary? And I just emphasise for the committee that this is a Royal Commission that's been running and until recently known to be concluding its work right about now. But I just want to be clear and correct about that being the government's approach to the matter in terms of funding. And, contrast that, against the provision that the government's made of at least $50 million just now, together with some accelerated legislation for the redevelopment of the North Adelaide Golf Course, for example. It's possible to make provision for such future expectations, and the Minister's given a fairly clear indication of the government's intent on receipt of the Royal Commission report. So if it's another opportunity for the Minister to identify any money at all in the budget, then I welcome that indication where it might be found. If it's to be found in some forward contingency that's not in the budget but in contemplation, then I'd invite the Minister to provide an indication of what the amount is. And otherwise, if it's a matter for mid-year budget review, then invite the Minister to be clear about that.
So I'll be very clear about two things. Firstly, the Royal Commission will provide its findings on the 18th of August, 7 to 8 weeks away, and significant investment will follow when we have the opportunity to look rightly at what is recommended in that Royal Commission into domestic, family and sexual violence. Of course, we will look at the recommendations and then determine, again, that significant investment going forward. In terms of the question about women waiting, again, let me be very, very clear. This budget contains funding for the Royal Commission Response Unit, so that as soon as we receive that report, as we have already been preparing for, we will set about determining that response. Also, in this budget, we have new funding for the domestic, family and sexual violence prevention and recovery hubs that were a new investment when we came to government, an investment that we called and called and called on the previous government to provide, was not forthcoming. We provided that investment and those hubs are established, and we're now providing further hubs. And those hubs provide an opportunity for women in South Australia, alongside the 10 regional safety hubs, which also are now funded with paid staff. They were not before we came to government. Provides an opportunity for women to seek early access to support, referrals, advice close to home. Also, in terms of that question about waiting, the member will see in the budget the significant investment into housing that is provided. In that housing, what is included is $15 million toward new accommodation in the city for particular cohorts of women. That sits alongside the recent opening of the YWCA housing. It sits alongside our ongoing and considerable investment into crisis, transitional and ongoing housing for women who are experiencing domestic, family and sexual violence. And it also sits alongside our reversal of the terrible, terrible cuts to Catherine House and the Women's Domestic Violence Court Assistance Service. They are now, through this government, restored. So all of those funds will continue. There are many other things that I will speak about in terms of funding that we have now for women experiencing domestic, family and sexual violence, and for all of the other parts of the system in terms of perpetrator intervention, recovery and healing supports. And also, on top of that, as I've been very clear about, on receipt of the findings of the Royal Commission, which we will rapidly assess and consider those recommendations, significant investment will follow.
Thanks, Chair. My question is, again, by reference to page 114, same program summary, but this time focused on the first of the highlights, the first dot point under highlights 24-25, which takes us to a highlight being described as the introduction into Parliament, the Criminal Law Consolidation Coercive Control Amendment Bill 24, following extensive consultation. With that in mind, again, it's the same theme. What resources are available for the implementation of that legislation? And I put that in the particular context of remarks from the Police Minister yesterday, and I'll quote him for the benefit of the committee. The Minister might already be aware. Yesterday, Police Minister said that, and I quote, "The regime will not come into effect until 2028 here in South Australia, and part of the reason why was to see how these new reforms were being rolled out in other parts of the country to understand what impact that had generally, but in particular on police resourcing as well. Hopefully over the course of the next 1, 2 and 3 years we'll have a better understanding of what that researching impact looks like." So the question against the backdrop of that claimed highlight is, why is the legislation not coming into effect until 2028, despite it being an election commitment from the government, and I think something that the Minister's advocated for and has had as a particular personal priority, and how, again, to take up the same analogy as before, we've seen the government pushing through legislation and commitments in budget for the golf course redevelopment in a matter of hours, but we're going to see years and years now before the implementation of the coercive control, despite it being described as highlight number 1 in the highlights list.
Thank you very much to the member for the question, and he is right, it's been a priority of mine and of our entire government, and that priority is evidenced by the fact that I first moved from opposition as an opposition party. We first moved to criminalise coercive control in 2020, and very sadly that bill at that time was not supported. It did not progress through the Parliament. On coming into government, of course, I seized the opportunity, our government did, to move towards criminalising coercive control. And what has been really, really important about the process of getting to the point where a bill has now progressed through the lower house and is currently being debated in this house is that we took the time before the new bill was developed, to engage with targeted groups of women, so Aboriginal women, women living with disability, women from diverse multicultural communities, young women, a range of women, to really make sure that we got the content of the bill right. So we went through that process, we developed the bill, taking on board their feedback, and we then took the bill out for further broad consultation with our community. And one of the things that was very clear from that consultation, from those earlier targeted conversations, but has also been very clear from evidence around the world, including in those jurisdictions in the UK that were the very first to progress coercive control legislation, so in Scotland and England, their very strong advice and our very strong advice from consultation was that, yes, get your legislation right, get that through the Parliament. As I said, I first attempted to do that in 2020. It's now progressing through our Parliament. But make sure, absolutely make sure, that following the passage of the legislation through the Parliament, that you take the time that is needed, and there has been strong advice that that time is significant, to make sure that there is broad community understanding, that there is understanding in every sector, every government department about what coercive control is, so that when women present with an experience, having gone through an experience of coercive control, it is recognised, particular charges are made in the best way possible. It progresses through the courts with that recognition of what it is and what the appropriate remedies are. So we've taken that advice. It's been consistent and really clear from every jurisdiction. And I have talked with people across the globe who've introduced this legislation. I've made it my business for a very long time to find out the best possible way to do this, and that is absolutely the advice, to make sure you get it right so that we do not have an experience of women raising this issue and it not being understood in the way that it should be, and the appropriate penalties and actions being taken following the raising of that. So we are absolutely taking that advice on board. We have also been working on that broad community awareness raising. We have been in contact with Sue and Lloyd Clark. They've spoken at a forum here where we launched a campaign called See the Signs to begin that process of raising community awareness about coercive control. We had a first iteration of that campaign. The Attorney General's Department then ran an iteration of that campaign. We also leveraged the time around the FIFA Women's World Cup to build a further iteration of that campaign to spread a message to a broad, diverse group of people about what coercive control is. We will continue to do that, and on the passage of the legislation, we will take that time to absolutely, rightly make sure we get that implementation right.
Maybe it's a follow-up. And indeed, I agree the Minister has been calling for this, I think, significantly in 2021. The Minister highlighted that criminalisation of coercive control was urgently required then. I mean, in those circumstances, what's the Minister's view about the Police Minister's remarks about the regime not coming into effect until 2028? You know, again, notwithstanding that it's a highlight of 24-25, and in circumstances where I understand, for example, New South Wales, it's come into effect. Is this a matter of, you know, a wrestle for the Minister to be having with the Police Minister, or how would you understand the allocation of resources and the, you know, the implementation time having really extended in this significant way?
Absolutely not. It's the right thing to do, and that is the learnings around the world to make sure that get the legislation right, pass the legislation, and then spend time through whatever particular processes other jurisdictions have used to learn from those processes, and to make sure that you have a significant period of time to make sure that once it takes effect, the community, services, everybody is ready. Each person who comes into contact with this awful behaviour from a service or response lens understands exactly what they're seeing, and understands and has in place the particular processes to make sure that its implementation is effective. I don't have the figures about the Scottish experience and the English experience on hand. I had lengthy conversations and there was lengthy articles written about the fact that one of their learnings was that having implemented it quite quickly, that there was a very, very, very low number of convictions. And despite there being no lessening of the occurrence of the offence, occurrence of the terrible behaviour, the convictions did not flow because there wasn't this broad understanding in the community and in all who interact with this particular offence of what it looked like, how to treat it, how to respond. So we absolutely want to make sure that we heed that advice and get it right.
Minister, if I can take you back to hubs, which you addressed earlier, and the budget paper I'm referring to is Budget Paper 5, the budget initiatives, where the budget provides $2 million over 2 years to continue and expand the domestic violence prevention and recovery hubs in Adelaide's north and south. Minister, what additional services will be delivered through the expansion of those hubs in the northern and southern suburbs? How many clients are you expecting to benefit from the expanded service, and what metrics will be used to measure that impact?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, and I know that this has been an area of interest for the member as well. As the member has said, there has been a commitment for $2 million additional dollars to be provided to ensure the continuation and the expansion of these really critical services that didn't exist at all until we came to government and set about the establishment of those hubs. In relation to the slightly different models, because each of those communities informed us about what they wanted their hub to look like. And the southern hub, which is called the Yellow Gate, is very much about women being able to come in any circumstance to that place and either be immediately connected to counselling or referred if there are particular supports and services that they need. And I say this because it's always a double-edged sword. Sadly, the demand has been strong, sadly. And I say it's a double-edged sword because it is incredibly sad. I'm so deeply frustrated that the demand is strong. It is good, however, that those women now have that place to go. So in relation to the southern hub, there is demand. So we want to be able to respond to that demand. There are other services that are now associated with that particular hub and providing particular supports at particular times, which is great. It's growing in terms of others that are aligning their efforts there too. So that is about responding to demand. The northern hub is a different model because what the hub, what the community there wanted and what the strong advice from Women's Safety Services was, is that what was actually needed there is some co-location of Women's Safety Service personnel and police and women's legal service personnel, so that women in particular circumstances could come into a very confidential environment and actually make those police reports, as well as then be immediately connected to the Women's Safety Service. So again, the demand there has been very strong, and we anticipate that additional funding will sustain and grow that demand there, but it will look slightly different because each of those hubs have been set up rightly because it's what community articulated in a slightly different way. The other point I wanted to make to the member, I of course, none of us can predict the findings of the Royal Commission, but what I do know from evidence right across the country is that hubs as a model are being considered, and there are different versions. There's the Orange Door and In Touch in Victoria and other iterations of hubs right around the country and indeed in other places around the world. So I do look forward to continuing to explore how else we may grow or reshape those into the future.
Push the Minister a little bit more in terms of data and metrics. The reference to Yellow Gate,
Yes.
in the southern suburbs. I understand the bittersweet element of what is sad about a growth in demand, but the question really goes to, without, in a de-identifying way, how many clients, what data, what does that growth look like? How is it measured? So do we know to a number what that growth is for those hubs? So
Yes.
how many clients are expected, or are we seeing now in that expansion, and what metric, how are we measuring that?
Yes, so we...
Impact as well.
Yes, we do have those numbers for each, and I'm just looking at those now. For the Southern Hub, between a roughly 12 to 13 month period, there were more than 500 inquiries. 41% of those continue to receive a direct service. There are also figures that can be broken down around the diversity of particular people who are approaching the service. Also, the other thing that the Yellow Gate does, because this is the model the community wanted, as well as those inquiries that come directly through the door there at Noarlunga, that hub has a team that also is out in the community. So any community events in that broad southern metropolitan area, they are there also giving information, making sure people know about the hub. So there is also that figure about the number of those community visits that they do. But of course, as you can imagine, at those community events, sometimes they're very well attended and others not. But in terms of those, actually I can tell you, 398 attendances across 19 community events held in roughly that 12-month period. But it is a different model. In terms of the Northern Hub, there have been, and of course the Northern Hub started slightly later than the Southern Hub because, again, there was the need to establish it in a particular way with police, women's safety service to find the right secure site for that particular hub. And in the roughly 9 to 10 month period, there's been direct support for around 148 individual women and around 406 referrals that have also come through. That, I guess when I say referrals, there's those direct services, but also ones where there's work with a particular woman, but the ultimate ongoing service may be rightly with another service provider.
Notice then the demographic breakdown that the Minister seems to have sitting across both the Northern and the Southern Hub, particularly better to understand the diversity you mentioned for the Southern Hub. So would the Minister take on notice providing those details to identify the need?
Yep.
Thank you. Chair, if I can move us on to budget paper for volume 3, page 114, looking at targets. The bottom dot point target states that, or says the following: participate in participate in the independent review of South Australia's homelessness system and support alignment between the review of the Domestic and Family Violence Safety Alliance and the response to the Royal Commission into Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence. So this is about expansion of DV beds. The question I'm putting to you, Minister, is that I understand the DVF Homelessness Alliance and funding is a part of your portfolio of responsibilities. Why do the specialist women's services still only have direct responsibility for the 31 beds which were provided under the previous government in 2020? So what has happened to the other 69 which had been funded and approved by the previous government?
Is this the one? What I can, oh, yeah. Actually, the ones I want. So what I can tell the member at length, and I know there was some unfortunate, incorrect commentary about this recently. So what I can tell the member is that there are those 40, it's actually 40 crisis beds that you speak about, the 31 crisis beds for women and then the 9 beds for perpetrators, so it's actually 40. We saw the lack of funding, ongoing funding for those on coming to government, so we set about funding those beds. Also, across the Alliance, there are more than 300 other properties, and those properties go across crisis accommodation, they go across transitional accommodation, and they go across those ongoing supportive, ongoing housing properties. So there is way more than the figure that you just spoke about, way more than that. That's very, very clear. Also, alongside those hundreds of properties there for women experiencing domestic, family and sexual violence, we contributed another $7.5 million to continue those crisis beds that you spoke about. On top of that 40, there is the more than 300 other properties. Plus, we have set about investing in establishing new accommodation for women experiencing domestic, family and sexual violence. Just recently, we were part of the opening of the YWCA housing development in the city. Soon, the $15 million Tucker Street development will open. Also, as I said before, our government has restored the funding that unbelievably was cut by the former government to Catherine House. There are many cuts that I was dismayed about by the former government, but the funding cut to Catherine House was just unconscionable. We've also restored that funding. We've provided ongoing funding that wasn't there for those crisis accommodation beds, and we continue to ensure there is accommodation across crisis, transitional and ongoing housing for women experiencing domestic, family and sexual violence. The other point that I would make, of course, and it's very clear in this budget, it's very clear in our housing roadmap, our government is delivering in terms of growing the supply of housing, and we've been very clear that a range of types of housing are included in that significant investment.
Omnibus question now. I think you better. Yep.
For your answer, Minister. Let's just jump in. Estimates omnibus questions. Number 1, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister how many executive appointments have been made since 1st of July 2024 and what is the annual salary and total employment cost for each position. 2, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister how many executive positions have been abolished since 1st of July 2024 and what was the annual salary and total employment cost for each position. 3, For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what has been the total cost of executive position termination since the 1st of July 2024? 4. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, will the Minister provide a breakdown of expenditure on consultants and contractors with a total estimated cost above $10,000 engaged since 1st of July 2024, listing the name of the consultant, contractor or service supplier, the method of appointment, the reason for the engagement and the estimated total cost of the work. 5. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, will the Minister provide an estimate of the total cost to be incurred in 2025-26 for consultants and contractors, and for each case in which a consultant or contractor has already been engaged at a total estimated cost above $10,000, the name of the consultant or the contractor, the method of appointment, the reason for the engagement and the total estimated cost. 6. For each department or agency reporting to the Minister, how many surplus employees are there in June 2025, and for each surplus employee, what is the title or classification of the position and the total annual employment cost. 7. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what is the number of executive staff to be cut to meet the government's commitment to reduce spending on the employment of executive staff, and for each position to be cut, its classification, total remuneration costs and the date by which the position will be cut. 8. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what savings targets have been set for 2025-26 and each year for the forward estimates? What is the estimated FTE impact of these measures? 9. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, A, what was the actual FTE count at June 2025 and what is the projected actual FTE count for the end of each year of the forward estimates? B, what is the budgeted total employment cost for each year of the forward estimates? And C, how many targeted voluntary separation packages are estimated to be required to meet budget targets over the forward estimates and what is their estimated cost? 10, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, how much is budgeted to be spent on goods and services for 2025-26 and for each year of the forward estimates? 11, for each department and agency reporting to the Minister, how many FTEs are budgeted to provide communication and promotion activities in 2025-26 and each year of the forward estimates and what is their estimated employment cost? 12. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, what is the total budgeted cost of government paid advertising including campaigns across all mediums in 2025-26? 13. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, please provide for each individual investing expenditure project administered the name, total estimated expenditure, actual expenditure incurred to June 2024 and budgeted expenditure for 2025-26, 2026-27 and 2027-28. 14. For each grant program or fund the Minister is responsible for, please provide the following information for the 2025-26, 2026-27 and 2027-28 financial years. A, name of the program or fund. B, the purpose of the program or fund. C, budgeted payments into the program or fund. D, budgeted expenditure from the program or fund. And E, details including the value and beneficiary of any commitments already made to be funded for the program or fund. 15. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, is the agency confident that you will meet your expenditure targets in 2025-26? Have any budget decisions been made between the delivery of the budget on 5 June 2025 and today that might impact on the numbers presented in the budget papers which we're examining today? And B, are you expecting any reallocations across your agency's budget lines during 2025-26? If so, what is the nature of the reallocation? 16. For each department and agency reporting to the Minister, A, what South Australian businesses will be used in procurement for your agencies in 2025-26? B, what percentage of total procurement spend for your agency does this represent? C, how does this compare to last year? 17. What percentage of your department's budget has been allocated for the management of remote work infrastructure, including digital tools, cybersecurity and support services, and how does this compare with previous years? 18. How many procurements have been undertaken by the department this financial year? How many have been awarded to interstate businesses? How many of those were signed off by the CE? 19. How many contractor invoices were paid by the department directly this financial year? How many and what percentage were paid within 15 days? And how many and what percentage were paid outside of 15 days? 20. How many and what percentage of staff who undertake procurement activities have undertaken training on participation policies and local industry participants this financial year?
Thanks, Chair. One final question the Minister might take on
One final
notice.
question. Sir.
Again, at page 114, the targets 25.
Squeeze that in.
And the fifth dot point, which is delivery of programs under the renewed NPA, on family, domestic and sexual violence, to commence on 1 July 2025. Will the funding that the government has provided here fund any new services, or will it continue to fund existing ones? And can the Minister provide to the committee a list of all of the services in this policy area that have been initiated during her term as Minister?
So I'll be very brief and answer this question now. So we were really pleased to sign the renewed national partnership on the 4th of February 2025 and have been really pleased to work alongside closely the federal government to deliver a range of programs across intervention, prevention, response and recovery and healing, including a range of incredibly innovative programs in the perpetrator behaviour change space.
Minister,
I've already answered it. I've already answered it.
Thank you. The allotted time having expired, I declare the examination of the proposed payments for the Office for Women complete. Further examination of proposed payments for the Department for Human Services are referred to Committee A. The member for King.
I move that the sitting of the committee be suspended until 1:30 p.m.
Put the question.